The late afternoon sun hung low over the rolling hills of Ridgeview County, casting long shadows across the Blackthorn shooting range. Dust kicked up from the gravel parking lot as cars pulled in and out, carrying people who came here for one simple reason: to practice their craft in peace. I was one of them. My name is Daniel Reed. 23 years with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, retired just 14 months ago. Most days now felt quieter than the ones I left behind: case files, surveillance ops, and the constant weight of carrying a badge. But the range was my anchor. Here, the world narrowed to the target in front of me, the steady rhythm of controlled breathing, and the familiar weight of responsibility in my hands. I had my Mossberg shotgun broken down on the bench, cleaning it after a productive session of patterning shots at 25 yards. The air smelled of gun oil, spent powder, and pine from the surrounding woods. A few other shooters nodded in quiet respect as they passed. This was a serious place, no drama, no politics, just people exercising their rights responsibly. That changed at 4:47 p.m. I heard them before I saw them clearly. Two men in dark tactical-style vests walked down the line of benches with purposeful strides. Their vests had bright yellow patches that read HOA Enforcement in bold letters. One carried a clipboard, the other had zip ties dangling from his belt. They moved like they owned the place. "Excuse me," the taller one called out, his voice carrying that fake authority tone I'd heard 1,000 times in my career. "Daniel Reed?" I looked up slowly, wiping my hands on a rag. "That's me." The shorter man, stocky with a thin mustache, stepped closer. "We're with the Ridgeview Heights Homeowners Association Compliance Unit. We've received multiple complaints about illegal firearm activity originating from your property at 1427 Maple Ridge Lane. Under HOA bylaws, we're authorized to confiscate prohibited weapons." I stared at them for a moment, letting the absurdity settle. My house was in Ridgeview Heights, sure. But this was a public shooting range, 5 miles outside the community gates. The tall one pointed at my Mossberg. "That shotgun needs to come with us. Now." I set the cleaning rag down carefully. "Gentlemen, you're standing on private range property, not HOA land. And even if you were, you have zero legal authority to seize lawfully owned firearms." The stocky one smirked and pulled out a folded paper. "This is a notice of violation. Sign it, hand over the weapon, and we'll avoid involving law enforcement." Around us, other shooters had started to notice. A woman 2 benches down lowered her rifle and watched quietly. An older man in a veteran cap paused mid-cleaning. The atmosphere shifted from relaxed focus to wary attention. I kept my voice even, the same tone I used in countless interviews during my bureau days. "Let me see your badges." They exchanged a quick glance. The tall one puffed up his chest. "We're HOA enforcement officers. We don't need badges like cops. The community voted on these powers last year." "Interesting," I said, "because I attended every HOA meeting last year, and I don't recall any vote creating an armed enforcement unit with seizure powers. Mind if I see some identification?" The stocky man's face tightened. "Look, mister, don't make this difficult. We've handled people like you before. Just comply." I stood up slowly, keeping my hands visible. At 6'1", and still in solid shape from Bureau fitness standards, I wasn't intimidating on purpose, but I knew how to use presence when needed. "People like me?" "Gun nuts who think the rules don't apply," the tall one snapped. "We saw your truck in the parking lot. We know where you live." That was their first real mistake. They'd followed me here. I glanced at the clipboard. The official letterhead looked printed at home, the signatures blurry. Amateur work. In my years chasing financial crimes and domestic terrorism leads, I'd seen plenty of forged documents. This had the same sloppy confidence. "Tell you what," I said calmly. "Why don't we call the actual county sheriff's office and let them sort this out? I have their non-emergency number right here." The stocky man stepped forward aggressively, reaching toward my shotgun on the bench. "We're taking it. Now." That crossed the line. In one smooth motion, I blocked his arm, not hard, just enough to stop the grab, while my other hand stayed open and visible. "Do not touch my property." He recoiled like I'd burned him. "That's assault." "No," I replied, my voice steady as a rangemaster's. That was preventing you from committing theft. Big difference. By now, the rangemaster, a retired Marine named Tom Whitaker, had walked over from the office. He was built like a tank and had zero tolerance for nonsense on his range. Problem here? Tom asked, his deep voice cutting through the tension. These men claim to be HOA cops, I said, trying to seize my shotgun. Tom looked the two men up and down, taking in the mismatched vests and cheap patches. HOA doesn't have cops. Never has. You boys got permission to be on my range harassing customers. The tall one tried to recover. This is a community safety issue. Save it, Tom interrupted. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the sheriff. You two stay right there. The stocky man's confidence cracked. Look, maybe we can just... No, I said. You came here, identified me by name, followed me from my home, and attempted to illegally seize private property. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime. I reached into my range bag and pulled out my old credentials, retired FBI agent card, still valid for identification purposes. I held it up so both men could see the gold seal and my photograph. Their faces went pale. Former federal agent, I said quietly. Special Agent Daniel Reed, retired. Spent most of my career investigating fraud, threats, and people who pretend to have authority they don't possess. The tall one took an involuntary step back. We didn't know. Obviously. I kept my tone professional, almost conversational. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to wait right here for the sheriff's deputies. You're going to answer every question they ask. And if I find out this little operation has targeted anyone else in the community, I'll make sure the full weight of every contact I still have in federal and local law enforcement comes down on it. Tom stood beside me, arms crossed, a solid wall of support. Other shooters had gathered at a respectful distance, phones out, recording. Good. Documentation mattered. As we waited for the deputies to arrive, the stocky man tried one last angle. It was just a prank, man. Some guys in the neighborhood thought it would be funny to mess with the new guy who has all the gun stuff. I looked at him for a long moment. A prank that involved following me, impersonating officers, and attempting theft? That's not a prank. That's a conspiracy. The tall one stayed silent now, staring at the ground. When the two sheriff's deputies finally pulled up in their cruisers, the scene was calm but serious. I explained everything factually, showed my retired credentials, and handed over the fake notice. Tom provided security camera footage from the range entrance, showing the men arriving and targeting my truck specifically. The deputies separated the two men for questioning. I watched as the reality of their situation sank in. Impersonating law enforcement, even poorly, carried real consequences. Following someone and attempting to seize property elevated it further. One of the deputies, a woman named Ramirez whom I'd met at community events before, approached me afterward. Mr. Reed, you handled that perfectly. Most people would have lost their temper. Years of training, I replied. De-escalation saves lives and court dates. She nodded. We'll handle it from here. Looks like these two have been pulling smaller stunts around the neighborhood, intimidating folks over minor violations. This time they went way too far. As the sun dipped lower, painting the range in deep oranges and reds, I packed at my gear. My shotgun went back into its case, cleaned and ready for next time. The two fake enforcers were placed in the back of separate cruisers. Tom walked me to my truck. You okay? Yeah, I said. Just disappointed. Places like this, neighborhoods like ours, they only work when people respect the rules that actually exist. He clapped me on the shoulder. Glad you were here today. Might have gone different with someone else. That night, back in my house on Maple Ridge Lane, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. The neighborhood was quiet, lights glowing warmly in windows. I thought about the years I spent chasing real threats, people who meant serious harm. These two were small-time bullies who thought a yellow patch and aggressive attitude could replace real authority. They were wrong. The next morning, the local community page lit up with careful posts about the incident. Names were left out, but the message was clear. Impersonation and harassment would not be tolerated. Several neighbors reached out privately to thank me. One older woman admitted she'd been threatened with fines for her garden flags. Another man said they'd tried the same intimidation tactic on him over his hunting rifles. I forwarded everything to Deputy Ramirez. The system would handle the legal side. 2 weeks later, I returned to the Blackthorn Range. The air felt cleaner somehow. Tom greeted me with a firm handshake. "Those two got charged," he said. "False impersonation, attempted theft, a few other things. Won't be bothering anyone for a while." I nodded, setting up my bench again. Good. As I loaded shells and brought the shotgun to my shoulder, the world narrowed once more to the target, the breath, and the shot. The recoil was familiar, comforting. Behind me, the range continued its quiet rhythm, people practicing, learning, exercising rights that responsible citizens had defended for generations. I wasn't a federal agent anymore, but some instincts never retire. The fake HOA cops had come looking for an easy target. They found someone who understood exactly what real authority looked like and what it didn't. And in the quiet aftermath, the neighborhood felt a little safer. Not because of fear, but because people had been reminded that pretending to have power is very different from actually protecting a community. The sun climbed higher over the hills. Another perfect day at the range.